Essentials Tutor at the Classical Conversations program at West Cobb for the school year 2019 to 2020. It was a wonderful experience. Last year was my son's first year going through the Essentials program. It was my first year going through Essentials program, and it was also my first year tutoring. It was a lot of information, but this program is wonderful and it is a great addition to your homeschool curriculum. I would like to go over the Essentials program and just some basic information when you're enrolled in the Essentials program, kind of what to expect. So the classical model has 3 stages of learning. The first stage is the grammar stage, the second stage is the dialectic stage, and the third stage is the rhetoric stage. The grammar stage has to do with memorizing facts. The second stage, which is the dialectic stage, has to do with how those facts relate to one another. And then the third stage is the rhetoric stage, which has to do with how you apply those facts. So the Essentials program deals with partly the grammar stage and also the dialectic stage. The goal of Essentials is to have a firm grasp on the grammar of language. So it's diving into the English language and being able to analyze and understand sentence structure, to understand parts of speech, to understand the spelling and punctuation rules, to understand how to edit a sentence. All these things can help you dive into what the English language really is. And it also helps if you choose to do challenge later on, then you understand how to apply those skills that you learned in Essentials for when you learn Latin in the challenge classes. Essentials is a 3-year expedition. It's designed for 4th through 6th graders. So your first years are going to try and master the grammar work. They will try and memorize the charts, and they will try to memorize grammar vocabulary, definitions, language components, and they begin learning and strengthening the grammar of the English language. And then the second and third years try to add more details to explore. So they are on the same terrain but a different elevation. So they are just building on what they already learned as first years. So dialectic discussions that we have in class involve analyzing sentences and words. So the tasks also increase in complexity. At the first week, you may have a simple sentence such as Jesus wept. So only 2 words, very simple. But as the weeks progress, also the sentence complexity progresses too. So you just build on what you've already learned. So week 1 and 2 will be a lot easier than say week 23 and week 24. In addition to analyzing sentences and diagramming sentences or the mastery charts and diving into the parts of speech, there are also other lessons that are included in the Essentials. You can add editing lessons where they learn to edit. Also, there's spelling words, there's vocabulary, there's homophones, there's punctuation and capitalization rules. So there's a lot that can be added. One of the rules that is good to remember though is that you always try and have your student do easy plus 1. So whatever is easy for them, go ahead and do that plus one other element that will challenge them. So you have what's easy plus one other thing that is a little bit harder for them to add into their work. Supportive parents are great, and parents that participate in Essentials class is amazing. It's important to remember that the parents are the teachers, and the tutor is there to help show examples, to help guide you through the material, but it's important to remember that the parents need to know the material just as much because they're the ones that are going to go home and teach it to the student. The amount of time that you spend on Essentials at home can vary, but it is recommended that you spend 30 minutes for the EEL portion, which is the Essentials for the English language portion, and then 30 minutes to an hour depending on the assignment for the IEW, which is the Institute for Excellence in Writing portion. So you could spend anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half each day on Essentials program. You might ask, do I need another English curriculum besides Essentials? The answer is no. You can just use Essentials as your core English for the year, It's going to cover so much and you're going to have so much information, you probably won't even have time for another English curriculum. So Essentials really does have all you need for that year. A typical Essentials class lasts 2 hours. There's a 30-minute time block for math. During that time, you can play math games that help with addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division problems. There's also a game called Number Knockout, or referred to as Board Slam. You can find the official rules for that at nationalnumbernockout.com. It's another fun game that we played each week last year, and the kids really like that too. The other portions are divided into EEL, which is 45 minutes. That is the essentials of the English language. So that would include sentence structure, the purpose, the pattern. It's also going to include a part of speech focus. One week you may be working on verbs. The next week you may be working on adjectives. And it also includes the mastery charts. So each week you will have a chart, or you will be reviewing a chart that you have already learned. And then you have a 45-minute time block for IEW. So that is the Institute for Excellence in Writing. And in that you include the unit and structural model. And you also have a writing-based lesson book. And last year was our cycle 2, and so we had a medieval history based writing book. Cycle 3 will have a United States history writing book. It also includes a stylistic technique to add each week. For example, you might be adding an ing opener, or you might be adding a because clause, or you might be adding a quality adjective. So you add all these things to just add to the writing of your student. There's also vocabulary words that you can add into their writing. And so a lot of times those vocabulary words will pertain to whatever lesson we are going over that week. We also, in our class, read papers. So the students would come and read their papers each week to get a sense of reading it out loud and presenting it to the class. There are 2 categories for IEW, the Institute for Excellence in Writing. The first category has to deal with reports, research, and essays. The second category will have to deal with narrative, descriptive, and prompt-based writing. So it bounces back and forth between the units. So Unit 1 and 2 are the basic models of how to introduce writing. And then you begin with keyword outlines. And then you have Units 3, 5, 7, and 9. They all deal with the narrative, descriptive, and prompt-based writing. And then you have Units 4, 6, and 8, which are about the reports, the research, and the essays. And the stylistic techniques are added each week, and they just add variety and interest to the students' writing. And Andrew Pudwa is the principal speaker and director of IEW. As an Essentials class, we had regular video viewings throughout the year. Before we start a specific unit, we would watch the video, and then that will kind of help you as a parent and then as the tutor to go over what you're going to be doing in class, and then to help your student when it's time for them to write their paper. Parents can also scale the work for IEW. So if, for example, you were assigned to write 4-paragraph paper, if you know your student can't do that, follow the easy plus 1 rule. And if it's easy for them to do 2 paragraphs, then you can just do the 2 paragraphs. And you can make it whatever level is easiest for your child plus 1 harder element. One of the things I like about this program is that it teaches the student how to think, not necessarily what to think. So they can use what they have learned in Essentials when it comes to their writing, and they can apply it throughout college. You could even be writing a thesis paper and refer back to something that you learned in Essentials class. It really does build onto each other, and once you learn the basics, it's easy to go from there. It's okay if you weren't in Foundations prior to joining the Essentials program, but it is interesting to see how the things you learned in Foundations do apply to things that you learn later in Essentials. So for example, in Foundations, for example, Cycle 2, Week 1, they learned the parts of speech: noun, pronoun, verb, adverb, conjunction, interjection, preposition, and adjective. Well, if you look at the Master Chart A that comes from the Essentials program, it's introduced in Week 1, and there is a box on there that has the parts of speech. So when your Essentials student comes to that section and to fill out the chart, they can fill that part out because that's something they've already learned back in Foundations. Another example would be Cycle 2, Week 15. In foundations, they learned the 4 purposes of a sentence: declarative, exclamatory, interrogative, and imperative. That is also on your chart A for the essential student. So they could fill that out automatically if they've already learned it in their foundations. So it does build upon each other. Another example of how foundations ties into essentials is in Cycle 2, Week 1, their history sentence was, in 800, during the medieval period, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne, Holy Roman Emperor of Europe. So now the foundation students know who Charlemagne is. Then in essentials, during Unit 4, which was summarizing a reference, they read about Charlemagne, and then they did a keyword outline in a paragraph about Charlemagne. So it's interesting to see how they do tie into each other. So you might remember something that you learned in foundations that you can apply in essentials. There is a lot of information that's going to be poured onto you when you become an essentials student or an essentials parent. Just for example, this is our guide. So it's not thin, it's pretty thick. So there is a lot of information that's going to come to you. And it may seem overwhelming if you're your first year, and then even as the second or third year, but it is important to remember that you can always do easy plus 1. It's also important to remember, if you think of a piece of paper and you pour some glue on it, and then you shake a whole bunch of glitter on it, when you lift that piece of paper up, some of the glitter is going to fall off. So not everything is going to stick. So the same thing with your first year. Not everything is going to stick the first time. But the important thing is that when you do it over and over again, that more and more glitter that you pour on there, more will stick on there. And you have a good basis now. And so Essentials is a wonderful program that will help guide you through the English language.